Hello and welcome to Granada Reports, live with the latest across the northwest.
Hello there, here's what's lined up on the programme this evening.
Scenes from Afghanistan shock the world as the Taliban take control. Afghans here in the northwest fear for family and friends back home.
It's not something new for us. We've lived through war. We were born in war. So therefore, we hope that the situation will get better.
As a refugee crisis looms, we hear from a former judge who championed women's rights, who fled the Taliban and settled in Oldham.
They tried to kill me, and I'm thinking every single woman activist is Marzia. They will face the same problem. I cannot see. We don't deserve this.
Also on the programme, the end of the pandemic. From today, the double-jabbed won't have to isolate if they come into contact with someone carrying the virus.
Lonely through lockdown, how Mr. Spencer the monkey has finally found love.
And if you can't get hold of a monkey, you might have more joy with a monkey nut. It's great weather this week for indoor activities, I'm afraid. All the details coming up later.
Yes, plenty to make you smile later on in the programme. But first, saddened but not surprised. That's how Afghans living here in the northwest are reacting to the collapse of their homeland.
The Taliban are in control of Afghanistan for the first time in 20 years after Kabul, its capital, was surrounded and taken over.
For many, there are fears for the safety of friends and relatives, especially for women and children, after a return to a strict Islamic state.
MPs from across the northwest will soon return to Westminster as the government attempts to respond to the fast-changing situation.
In a moment, we'll be hearing from one woman who sought asylum in Oldham on her experience of escaping from the clutches of the Taliban. But first, this report from Andrew Fletcher.
Kabul airport, now seen as the only escape route from Afghanistan for thousands of desperate people. Some climbing onto the fuselage of a taxiing American military aircraft, others trying to board commercial planes that have been prevented from taking off. Taliban fighters have been taking over checkpoints in Kabul after taking over the capital without a fight. A sudden end to 20 years of democracy in Afghanistan, watched from thousands of miles away by Afghan communities in the northwest.
This was basically expected to happen because, once the international support was withdrawn, we knew that it would be very difficult for the Afghan army to resist.
Saeed Sadat is worried for his family in Afghanistan. Last week, his cousin, who taught literacy to Afghan soldiers, was killed in a bombing carried out by the army he worked for. He says what people want most in Afghanistan is an end to the bloodshed.
Any responsible citizen of our country would feel saddened. It's not something new for us. We've lived through war. We were born in war. So therefore, we hope that the situation will get better.
But many Britons in Afghanistan aren't waiting for the situation to improve. 600 troops have arrived in Kabul to get UK nationals and their local allies to safety.
At the very least, our obligation has to be as many of these people through the pipeline as possible. But I think I also said, and it's a really deep part of regret for me, that some people won't get back. Some people won't get back, and we will have to do our best in third countries to process those people.
The Defence Secretary, who served as an army officer, was today reflecting the emotion felt by many of his former comrades. They helped to remove the Taliban from Afghanistan within weeks in 2001. Since then, more than 450 British military personnel have been killed in the country that's now back in Taliban hands.
It is, very heartbreaking to see what's going on and how quickly the country's been taken over so quickly after all the training we did for the Afghan police and the Afghan army to mentor them to hopefully take over the country and lead it into a better place.
The safety of those Afghan soldiers and police officers is now one of the most pressing concerns for Western governments. They will also be seeking urgent assurances that women's rights will be respected by the militant group that finds itself once again in control of Afghanistan. Andrew Fletcher, ITV News.
Well, one woman who knows all too well about what life can be like at the hands of the Taliban is Marzia Babakahel.
In Afghanistan, she was a Supreme Court judge and fought for the rights of women and girls.
She now lives in Oldham, but had to flee her homeland 13 years ago after years of threats and intimidation and eventually an attempt on her life.
Marcia now works with her local MP and the British Red Cross, helping refugees like her to settle in the UK. I spoke to her a little earlier and she said she was heartbroken and afraid.
Sad day. Disappointing and hopeless.
Now, the Taliban have said that people who stay will be safe. Do you believe them?
I never believe them because they cannot change.
They say they want an inclusive Islamic state and they are talking the right talk now, but do you think things will change very quickly?
Afghanistan is an Islamic country. What Islam they want to bring to my country? What kind of Islam they want? I'm a Muslim. Afghanistan is an Islamic country. What they want to bring in my country?
So why were you forced to flee? You were a judge and you were fighting for women's rights. What drove you out?
Because my idea and my views was not popular with the Taliban. Taliban is scared the women with pen. Taliban is scared the women with brain. The Taliban is scared women with a book because they became enemy with me.
You've settled in Oldham, sought asylum. Is there anything that you can do to help the people back home?
Of course. When I saw all the news from Afghanistan, they bring back in my past because two occasions, they tried to kill me. And I'm thinking every single woman activist is Marcia. They will face the same problem. I cannot see. We don't deserve this. We don't deserve this. My message for my country, for the people in the world, for the international community to come together and have a solidarity with us. And we need democracy. We need to have our power. We don't want to lose everything for one night, for one day. We sacrificed the women in Afghanistan. They worked very hard. They achieved. There's a women movement. They can't stop everything. They can't. They can't and they can't.
So what is your message to the world leaders now? Do you think they have abandoned the people of Afghanistan?
My message to the United Nations, to the international community, please open their eyes and listen to us what we want really. We want the peacekeeping to go back to Afghanistan and keep the women and the people in Afghanistan safe. Just I want this.
Yet peacekeepers had been in Afghanistan for 2 decades and there still wasn't peace. Did the Afghani people do enough to fight for freedom?
But we, the people in Afghanistan, brave enough to stand against the Taliban.
There has been a lot of corruption in your country, but what is your biggest fear for your friends and family right now?
The Taliban just start to searching people's houses. My fear is for the women, for women's rights, and the people they work with the government. I think they are not safe. I think they are the same me. They are Marcia. They are the same me. And everybody they're waiting. The Taliban go, they will kill them. This is the situation in Afghanistan. The Taliban is not the same people they talking on the TV. The mind never changed.
Marcia Babakahale, we can see the fear in your face. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you so much.
Well, those worrying developments will see our region's MPs return to Westminster much earlier than expected. Our political correspondent, Leisha McNally, joins us live now from Westminster. Leisha, what's been the reaction?
Well, Elaine, I think the very fact that Parliament has been recalled at this time tells you all you need to know about quite how serious the situation has become. Members haven't been brought back in the summer months since 2013. That was to vote on the Syrian crisis. In practice, it means many of our MPs will be cutting family holidays short, cancelling meetings they had in their own constituencies, making their way down here to Westminster, where Parliament will sit on Wednesday. The government is under intense pressure to lay out clearly for MPs the details of how it's going to respond to this crisis and what support will be available to the Afghan men, women and girls who could now be living in danger. So Wednesday morning, we're going to get a statement from the Prime Minister, followed by a debate. What we probably won't see, though, is a vote on any actual action. And it's left some wondering whether the recall is just symbolic, what the actual point of it is. Well, I spoke to Lisa Nandy, the Shadow Foreign Secretary and MP for Wigan, and asked her if all of this is too little, too late.
Well, there's no question that there have to be lessons learned from the absolute catastrophe that we've seen unfolding in front of our eyes. But the Afghan people don't currently have the luxury of despair. They don't have the luxury of raking over the decisions that have been made that have got us to this point. In terms of evacuating people, we've got hours, not days. And that's what I want to see our politicians focus on now.
And Alicia, this will be the first time MPs have gathered in a full House of Commons since before the pandemic.
That's right. The special measures that allowed MPs to dial in from their living room have now lapsed. If MPs want their say, they're going to have to come and say it in person. That's potentially hundreds of people and no COVID restrictions, although mask wearing is advised.
Alicia at Westminster, thank you.
And there's some breaking news to bring you. We just learned a further 200 UK troops are to be sent to Kabul to assist with the evacuation effort in Afghanistan.
And on tomorrow's programme, I'll be speaking to veterans of the Afghan conflict and some of the families who lost loved ones, left considering the very difficult question whether their sacrifice was worth it.
Next this evening, to the changes that will see thousands of us be able to avoid isolation, which could bring an end to the so-called pingdemic.
Yes, from today, people who've had both doses of COVID vaccine won't have to spend days in quarantine if they're in close contact with a positive case, but they will need to have a PCR test.
Today, hospitality businesses, who've often been among the hardest hit, welcomed the news. Ismail Barham now reports.
At its peak back in July, 59,000 people here in the northwest were told to self-isolate in just 1 week. The so-called pingdemic led to empty shelves, empty classrooms and cancelled trains. But from today, restrictions are being eased, meaning those coming into contact with someone with COVID won't have to isolate if they're under 18 or they've had their second vaccination at least 14 days ago. They are advised to consider wearing a mask indoors and reduce contact with other people, as well as taking a PCR test as soon as possible. They won't have to self-isolate whilst waiting for the results. A positive PCR test, however, means they will have to isolate regardless of their age or vaccination status. The change in rules won't impact the traffic light system for international travel, though. Red list arrivals will still be subject to 10 days hotel quarantine, while amber list arrivals will still need a PCR test within 2 days of arriving back in England. It's a welcome taste of freedom for the hospitality industry. Here at the Art School restaurant in Liverpool, the pingdemic's been a daily challenge.
It's been incredibly difficult to manage. It's been a lottery each morning, knowing who's able to come into work, who's been pinged, who hasn't been pinged. And yes, it has improved over the last couple of weeks, but now knowing today that that chapter is closed, so to speak, I think we can plan as a business and move on again.
But with almost 30,000 daily cases, today's relaxations aren't without risk. The government urging caution. On the streets of Liverpool today, there were mixed views.
The NHS app has been turned off on my phone for a while, so I've not really been taking much notice of it since we've been allowed to go out.
My husband, a few months ago, had COVID, even though he had both vaccines. So I'm worried that everything will be locked down again.
Good that we're trying to get back to some normality to a certain extent. I'm conscious, obviously, lots of people will still be concerned, but I think if we're just sensible and, you know, and kind of follow whatever the rules are in that establishment, I think it's fine.
But industry leaders say it's unlikely the pingdemic problem will be solved immediately, with younger staff still at risk of being pinged.
Restaurants and shops and that sort of thing, those type of industries are employing low age groups, so they're the ones that are on one vaccination. So no, that they will still have to isolate when they get pinged.
But here at least the new rules are being welcomed. This one industry that's hungry to get back to some normality. Mel Barham, ITV News, Liverpool.
Lots of changes again, but now when it comes to choosing somewhere to live, for most people, owning a house is the ultimate goal. It's a goal which is now, though, taking longer to achieve.
Yeah, rising house prices are one of the reasons more people are now renting for longer, which is why new build-to-rent developments are springing up in parts of the northwest which offer longer leases. James Wester reports.
Finding somewhere to live for the group described as Generation Rent hasn't always been easy. They are the under 40s who haven't yet saved enough to buy a house, and instead renting is a long-term plan. People like Danielle from Salford, who's a university lecturer. She's just moved into a new flat which she hopes to be in for at least 2 years.
I've changed jobs and I move around the country, and I think for me it's that security as well of knowing that this flat won't be sort of put up for sale, so that's really important.
She's chosen this new build-to-rent development in Salford. All the apartments are owned and managed by one company, which aims to lease them long-term rather than sell them.
We offer short-term and long-term tenancies, and we want people to be able to put their roots down, make a home, meet their neighbours and stay with us for as long as they want.
There are currently more than 57,000 buy-to-rent homes across the UK. Another 36,000 are being built, with almost 95,000 more planned. For most tenants, renting somewhere like this will feel very different to a traditional renting experience. You'll manage lots of things on an app on your phone, dealing with any problems with your flat, for instance. The fact is that renting here is supposed to feel very different.
Okay, so we've got our 2-bedroom here.
The apartments themselves can come furnished or unfurnished and don't look very different to those in other traditional developments. What sets them apart is the extra communal spaces that are available. At this block there's also an on-site gym. It's facilities like this that made all the difference to Danielle.
I think the outdoor space is really key. I use the gym and also the co-working space. This was a really big deciding factor.
John Lewis is one of the developers trying to get into the sector, with plans to use space on some of its existing sites to build as many as 10,000 homes across the country. Other developers are building from scratch. The government recommends that a fifth should be affordable homes offered at discounted rents, but there is concern that should be higher.
We think we need to be building about 90,000 new social rent homes every year for at least the next 10 years in order to meet the demand and the need for social housing. And currently we're only building a few thousand a year. So there's a huge need to do more on social housing, and that could sit really nicely alongside more investment and more building of build-to-rent homes.
What would you say to the critics who worry that developments like this could push up the rents all around here?
We have the same concerns, and that's why our starting point is ensuring that the rents we set are comparable to the market, because this only works if the customers are happy, if the buildings are full and people stay.
Build to rent will not solve all the problems of the housing market, but the demand for better long-term lets means it is a sector that will continue to grow. James Webster, ITV News, Salford.
Now, here's an interesting one for you. To the story of a little monkey who's been living alone through lockdown because his mate was subject to travel restrictions, like so many of us.
Yes, remember those? Now, Mr. Spencer is a cotton-top tamarin miniature monkey who lives at the Lakeland Wildlife Oasis in Milnthorpe in Cumbria, all alone.
He's part of an important breeding programme to ensure the future of his endangered species.
Now, Fiona Marley-Patterson rather rudely invited herself along to Mr. and Mrs. Spencer's first date.
Having worked up his best punk rock hairdo, Mr. Spencer spent lockdown alone. In his mature years now, he had no time to lose, but his search for love was thwarted by travel restrictions. Until now, his new girlfriend has finally moved in.
She's a beautiful French lady who came to us via Scotland. So here we are quite happy to present Madame Spencer to him today. A lovely lady. She spent the evening in this enclosure in a crate so that they got to talk to each other through the doors. And I've got to say, it was love at first sight, really. They've got along really, really well. Mr. Spencer, here's the secret, he's actually a bit of a wimp. And Madame Spencer's coming and she's proper beefy. So I don't think he'd have started on her anyway.
But as she confidently checked out their new home, he followed her lead. Perhaps he'll get more out of life now. The wide eyes as they see their new love nest for the first time.
This enclosure has been built specially for them. So in South America, they'd be in the rainforest and they'd have lots of light. So they're surrounded by trees here and they need the light for vitamin D. It's good for their fur and for their bones.
They're one of the top 25 rarest monkeys in the world. They live in sort of small pockets of rainforest in Colombia, and those pockets are so sort of spread apart by farmland now that they can't actually get to each other to kind of mate and create new groups and all of that. And they're highly revered there. The Colombians love them. They celebrate International Cotton Top Tamarin Day every year, just as we are this weekend. They wear big white wigs and they have big parties and parades and stuff. But they are in serious trouble, and it does feel really, really good for us to be able to be helping out with that conservation effort.
But they're not the only new arrivals here. These ones are a bit harder to find. The Scottish wildcat.
It's about the size of a large tabby cat, but they're vicious and they have an attitude. They're quite common in Europe. In the UK, they were persecuted. Also, they've suffered through interbreeding with domestic cats as well, which kind of dilutes the sort of gene pool. So they become super rare. They are critically endangered in this country. So there's only a small population of them up in the Highlands of Scotland, thought to be anywhere between 400 at the top end, right down to possibly 40 individuals left in the wild.
So here we are in an enclosure with vicious cats. I'm assured she really does want nothing to do with me. But finally, she tolerated my presence long enough to show you the zoo's most elusive creature. Fiona Marley-Patterson, ITV News, Milnthorpe.
Doesn't look that vicious, does it?
It looks like just a cat to me, but what do I know? And what happened to the monkeys?
I think we thought we'd give them some private time.
Yeah.
On that first date.
Well, Madam Spencer is very beefy, so it sounds like Mr. Spencer's got his work cut out for him for the next few weeks. So we'll have to keep an eye on that.
OK, now for the weather. Here's Emma.
Now that is brew weather. And only boiling what she needs.
United Utilities sponsors ITV Granada weather.
Big up you, sis.
Hello there, very good evening to you. Well, the weather this week is going to be great for indoor activities. Yes, it's all rather uninspiring, I'm afraid. It's a bit of a shame considering a lot of us are off on our holes, albeit here in the UK. Bit of a cloudy start this morning, and tomorrow is going to be cloudy, but a different kind of start altogether. Very low cloud, very gloomy, very damp. It's going to be very close and muggy feeling and a bit misty as well, especially over those higher routes, those Transpennine routes. And the whole week really is looking like being typically British. Uninspiring, I'll say it again, weather, and we may have to apologise for the number of times we say the word cloudy over the next few days as well, but that's just the way it is. So we've got high pressure to the west, low pressure to the east, and that combination creates a northwesterly airflow. Now, high pressure doesn't always mean sunshine, and it certainly doesn't in this instance, because there are fronts just nudging around the northern flank of that high, feeding lots of moisture into the northwesterly flow, so lots of cloud and some drizzle, especially in the west across the UK over the next few days. Over the next few hours for our part of the world, a few showers keep coming with some clearer spells as well, but then cloud gradually thickens from the west and the northwest there, with spells of rain pushing in overnight and into tomorrow as well. They'll gradually push away eastwards, lots of mist and low cloud forming over higher ground as well, and it's still quite breezy. Here are your sunrise and sunset times for tomorrow, 5:52 and 8:37. And first thing in the morning, it's a very glampy kind of day. Gloomy, damp, lots of mist and fog around, especially over the hills, as I say, and a very dense feeling day. I think that's a good way to describe it. The rain and the showers clear to drizzle in the afternoon, and after that, still some rain around on Wednesday, maybe some brighter spells on Thursday. Bye-bye.
United Utilities sponsors ITV Granada weather.
2 sugars, please. Oh, lovely.
And that is all for us this evening. On tomorrow's programme.
From complete beginner to medal contender, we'll meet Liverpool's taekwondo star Beth Munro, who's hoping to strike gold at the Paralympics in Tokyo. Just look at her go, she's fab.
What a superstar. Looking forward to all her efforts in the Paralympics. So do join us for that, and I'll be back, or Elaine will be back after news at 10. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.